As the world remains focused on the Israel and Hamas war, Russia's war on Ukraine rages on, and one of the significant players in that conflict is the country of Belarus, under the presidency of Alexander Lukashenko. Mr. Lukashenko, nicknamed Europe's last dictator, has plunged Belarus into a position that many would describe as a client state of Vladimir Putin's Russia. In 2020, Lukashenko won re-election against Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, but according to election monitoring organizations, the election was rigged. In fact, the country of Lithuania recognizes Ms. Tsikhanouskaya as the president of Belarus. Joining us now to discuss Belarus's role in Russia's war in Ukraine and the struggles of the Belarusian people under the thumb of the Lukashenko regime is Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, president-elect of Belarus. Thank you very much for joining us on Forum Daily.
Thank you for inviting. It's my honor.
You've essentially been in exile since the election in 2020. Can you describe to Canadians the conditions of that election and what led you to having to flee your home country?
Actually, back in 2020, we had presidential elections, and it was my husband actually who wanted to participate in the elections, but he became very popular person among Belarusian society, and regime was frightened by this, and they put him into jail, and my husband couldn't apply his documents as his candidate for elections. And out of love to my husband and to my country, I did it instead of him. Having absolutely no political experience, being just housewife and mother of 2 children, I decided to run instead of him because I saw huge support of Belarusian people for democratic changes in our country. And on 9th of August 2020, we hold elections which Lukashenko for sure lost. And we have proofs of this, but to seize the power, Lukashenko's regime unleashed hugest terror and tyranny in our country. Huge level of repression started that's still going on in our country. And at that moment, Putin supported Lukashenko also politically and economically. At that moment, maybe we didn't know yet that Putin will need Belarus as launching pad to attack Ukraine. And we were really shocked that Lukashenko was supported because our fight was not geopolitical fight. Our fight also was only because we didn't want anymore to live under dictatorship. We wanted to develop as democratic countries. So under being blackmailed by KGB, we still have KGB in Belarus, I was made to flee Belarus. So since then I live in Lithuania, and actually since 2020, about 500,000 of people left Belarus because of repressions. And now we organizing our work from exile, though I have to say that people in Belarus are not giving up as well. You know that being in absolute brutal regime, when till now, every day about 15, 20 people are being detained for wrong colors, our national colors, like red, white, red, white as our national flag, for supporting Ukraine, for opposing the war, for speaking even Belarusian, our official language, people can be detained. And at the moment we have officially recognized 1,500 political prisoners, but the real number of people who have been detained for politically motivated cases is up to 5,000. So it's a real brutal fight. But we are not alone in our fight. All the democratic world is standing with us, though, of course, it's so difficult to fight with dictators who don't respect any international laws.
Mm-hmm. We have about a minute left here before we go to break. We know that Belarus has played a major role in Putin's war on Ukraine. You described it as a launching pad. Can you give us some indication of what the people of Belarus think about their country's involvement in the war?
So about 86% of Belarusians are against participation of Belarus in this war. And here we have to clearly divide Lukashenko's regime, who became accomplice to Putin in this war and provided our territory, our facilities to this invasion, and Belarusian people, who since the very first day of the war sabotaged railways to slow down Russian equipment going to Ukraine. Our Belarusian volunteers fighting now in Ukraine, shoulder to shoulder with Ukrainian army, to defend Ukraine. Our political refugees who left Belarus because of repressions helped Ukrainian refugees, because we are, as people, understand what it means just to grab your child, to grab one bag and leave your homeland, leaving everything behind. So
we have to go to break. I don't mean to interrupt you. We have to go to break. We will be right back. Sviatlana, before the break, you were talking about the overwhelming opposition to Belarus's role in Russia's war. But you've mentioned the arrests. But what happens to dissidents and pro-democracy advocates when they are detained? What are the conditions like for those who are arrested by the state?
Belarusian people live like in Stalin's time era in Belarus at the moment, and our prisons are the same as during Stalin's Soviet Union. Is the worst places ever. Attitude to political prisoners in the Belarusian prisons are much worse than to ordinary criminals. People are constantly being tortured. People are humiliated physically and morally. Political prisoners are labeled with yellow labels showing that they are extremists, terrorists, or whoever, and it means that they should be beaten constantly. And actually, people don't get any medical assistance. People are dying in prisons. We have about 100 people who are in very bad health condition, people with cancer, people with diabetes, with heart attacks, but they don't get any medical aid. And I really urge all the organizations, human rights defending organizations, to pay attention to this.
And on the topic of dissidents, we've touched on what happens to them in the country. But at the same time, we know that the Lukashenko regime has ended passport renewals for citizens living abroad, which would mean that any Belarusians who fled can't renew their passport. What will that mean for you and others who live outside of the country and cannot safely return?
So actually, that's true. It's a revenge of Lukashenko's regime on those people who, for 3 years already, fighting against dictatorship and subjugating of Belarus from abroad. Lukashenko's regime can't reach physically people who live in Europe or other countries, so he decided to cut possibility to renew documents and passports. And now people, to renew the document, to expired passport, have to return to Belarus. Some people have already done this, and they immediately on the border, they were detained. So of course, it restricts our rights, for identification. And that's why, together with our democratic allies, we are elaborating systematic approach to this issue, and we are about to issue our own passports of democratic Belarus. It's a new document. It's maybe unprecedented case in modern world, but we have to show all the dictators that we are not slaves of the dictators, that these people don't own nation, don't own people, and we can find solution to such a brutal approach.
And in your view, in regards to the relationship between Lukashenko and Vladimir Putin, why are they so closely tied together?
Lukashenko and Putin always had this symbiotic friendship. When they needed each other, they made friendship. Lukashenko always was a seesaw. In winter, he made friendship with Putin because he needed cheap oil and gas. On summer, he made friendship with the European countries because he needed money. But when he unleashed terror against Belarusian people, when he showed how brutally he can behave when people are opposing him, he became illegitimate in the eyes of normal democratic European countries, and his only ally was Putin at that moment. Then he allowed Russia to use our territory, so he became accomplice in this war. And so now they're supporting each other. They're using actually each other to circumvent sanctions. For example, Putin is supporting Lukashenko economically. He gives him money And now Lukashenko plays a role of, a puppet of Russia. For him, it's more important to be loyal to Putin than to look for support from Belarusian society. And actually, Lukashenko himself selling our country, our Belarus, piece by piece to Russia. We see the process of Russification in Belarus. We see how Russia interfere into all the spheres of our life, into media, education, our culture, our history. And of course, it's a threat to our independence and sovereignty. And Lukashenko is doing this himself.
Ms. Tsikhanouskaya, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate it, and we hope for a better future for the people of your country.
We hope as well, and working hard for this. Thank you for your interest.
Thank you. Stay with us. When we return, we'll have your top headlines from around the world.